move right on to our next session of the day, as we're running right on time, which is on CPaaS. So I'm going to invite James Williams, Director of Programs at MEF, to moderate this panel for us and introduce the panelists, or ask them to introduce themselves. It is on CPaaS acceleration. How do we make it a reality for all? So please welcome James and the panelists to the podium. Thank you.
I'm behind you. We have to have some fun here. This is the last panel of the day here on this track. So Nasir, Yasser, all the speakers, thank you very much. Yasser, you've made me redundant because I'm the realist around here, keeping it real 100%. And this topic now is very, very close to my heart. We have people in the audience who know this topic inside out, people who live and breathe it. We've got Kevin from the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance here. Hi, Kevin. And loads of people online, I know, and this session is going to be recorded, and we'll get to a much wider audience. And I'd like to introduce my speakers. So you're going to come up one by one. They're all too busy taking pictures of themselves, and they're not even on stage. Nicholas, you can stop doing that. But we're going to start off with, oh, yeah, go on. We're going to have Valle Ortega, Maria. Please come on. That's very sensible coming on that side. I hadn't actually thought of that, but very well. Warm welcome. If you can sit under your picture, let's go for it. Next up, we've got Kedar Gupta from MTN Global Connect. Kedar? Sorry, but this is the point I was about to say. You rebranded, and I heard about the rebranding yesterday. Baobab, I'm going to ask you about that because I heard about it, but I'm going to hear straight from the horse's mouth. So please take a seat. No need to stand, those of you who've come up. We're going to hear a bit more about this rebrand. Let's go and have Mr. Mio Soldin from Infobip. Come on down. Your price is right. The commercial model is right for you. It's a reasonable price. And we've got Mr. Anurag is still taking pictures. This human of telecom, he just loves pictures. He loves selfies. And yes, he's on lots of panels and webinars himself. And now he is in the moderator hot seat with his humans of telecom. So thank you. And last but not least, we've got Mr. Nicholas Nikorian from Deutsche Telekom Global Carrier. Nicholas, a very warm welcome. Thank you. A round of applause for all the speakers. They haven't done anything yet, but they're about to. Fantastic. So before we get into it, I heard about it yesterday. I don't know anything about it myself. Can we hear about this rebranding, please, of MTN Global Connect to Baobab? And does it work?
Hi, James. Does it work?
It works. We hear you. So you're no longer MTN Global Connect. You're Baobab. What does Baobab mean? Where does that name come from?
Thanks, James. So Baobab derives its name from the baobab tree. Now, this is a tree that grows in Africa, and it's known for growing in conditions which require resilience, one. Two, it enables an entire ecosystem. It enriches the soil, it provides livelihood. So we drew from the baobab tree this brand, and what we want to do is to enable the digital ecosystem.
Perfect. There we have it, everyone. So I wasn't aware. I heard about it, and I'm going to get it straight from the brand themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, James.
No problem. There's a bit of free publicity. There's a bit of free publicity for everyone here. Come on, shameless. Absolutely everyone. Now, the topic, CPaaS. How do you make it a reality for all? Now, let's talk about, is it a reality for all at the moment? You heard me with my rating before on my previous panel I moderated with Mr. Les Bumpers from Aegis Mobile. I asked him how we're doing as an industry combating fraud. He gave a 7. I think if I was asked to ask some people on this panel, they may give a different answer, but we're not on a fraud or anti-fraud panel. We're on a CPaaS panel. So, folks, let's start off with you, Nicholas. 1 to 10. 1 is absolutely terrible. 10 is amazing. Everyone is using CPaaS. Where are we as an industry with getting literally the message across that CPaaS is something awesome? 1 to 10, and don't sit on the fence, please. I want a number.
First of all, I have a complaint because my feet cannot reach the floor with these songs. No, I'm just kidding. That's why I'm sitting forward like this. I apologize.
We've got to sit forward.
Yes, exactly. I'm too short for this. I have to give 2 scores. One is as an industry as a whole. I will give it a 5. From a telco perspective, I would give it a 1.
Why?
Because as an industry...
I expect you to just drop the mic then and walk off.
Exactly, and move off. As an industry, I think the CPaaS is not a new concept, okay? It has been there for years and years and years, and there are some very, very strong players already into this environment. When you look at the developer market, when it comes to CPaaS and all of that, there is plenty of it that is taking place. So it's not a new concept in an environment that we live in. Telcos, we are way, way behind in this environment. We are nowhere when it comes to CPaaS. We are just have not been focusing on it. I think there is a lot of focus on it right now, over the past year, 18 months or 2 years or so. But over the past 10 years, we have completely ignored this environment, and we have left, of course, it to others to participate in the ecosystem, but as a telco industry, we are very behind.
Well, we'll come back to that. And actually, I think that comment deserves a round of applause, because what we've got basically are 3 mobile operator groups essentially represented on stage. And it's very rare you have this conversation with this number of mobile operator groups here. And there was Nicholas just laying bare that, yes, as a mobile operator group, as a mobile operator, we may not have done enough or anything like that. We'll come back to that. Anurag, what's your take? 1 to 10, please.
I'm not giving a number because I've done that a number of times, but I'll make my point.
Why? Why can't you?
Because the number I feel is irrelevant, but I think the point is more relevant. So in my view, I feel that firstly, while there are 2 sides, which Nicholas said, but eventually I think everything matters from an end consumer perspective, like the user of the service. In this case, I'll say CPaaS is eventually being used by the enterprises to reach out to their customers. What I feel is that while we've done a great job at tapping the large enterprise segment, I think the small and the medium enterprises, which actually form the bulk of the demand, that's where I think we are actually lacking as an industry. So when I say an industry, the telcos also come into the picture, the service providers also come into picture, the entire ecosystem put together. So I feel that the day you have your small and medium enterprises being able to access CPaaS without any friction and having complete awareness of the power of this tool, this service, that's the point at which I feel that a CPaaS would be a 10 on 10. I think that's a never-ending race anyways, because CPaaS is itself a very wide concept. So, in some nooks and crannies, maybe we've done a great job. From a very plain SMS perspective, maybe you'll get a 7 or an 8 if you really want a number. If you go on to the larger CPaaS ecosystem, I might say a 3 or a 4. But that's not the point. I think the point is that what's missing and what needs to be done. I think that's what we'll talk more about. How do we make it a reality for all? But yeah, the large enterprises are definitely already in. It's now, and especially the digital natives, they're definitely in. What we need to look at are the traditional moms and pop shops around the corner. So when you go to buy your bread, how can you make sure that your bread merchant is actually being able to, your grocer is being able to offer you communication between both James and the merchant in a seamless manner? That's when CPaaS will become a reality for all.
Thank you, Anurag. And Miho, what's your take on it?
Okay, I will dare to give a number.
Yes.
So I'm already starting and ending optimistically. So I'm around 7.5, overlooking the industry, and I'll tell you why. I think the CPaaS agency did great so far, and it's really nice progressing. I respect everything and echo what my friend Anurag was saying. There's so much more to be done, but I won't punish the whole industry that's not doing well. And one thing you mentioned about previous panels, about identity, fraud and stuff. So CPaaS is where everything comes together. So this is why it never be 10, because fraud needs to be there, identity needs to be there, the right channels, the whole ecosystem from, as Anurag was saying, from the clients, brands and stuff, through whole total system. I will also agree with Nicholas, I wouldn't punish the telcos like with one, but I would call it opportunity. So it is a great opportunity for all of us to help telcos and to bring them back where they belong. And we have a privilege to work with all the groups here. And actually, telcos are doing hard, and it's not, easy for them. There is a lot of things which not going in telcos' favor, but I'm very positive. So I think we can, leverage what CPaaS was doing so far. There's a lot in front of us. we shouldn't all just forget that there is some customer who is paying for all this. So, you know, the CX, personalization, hyper-personalization, that's the key.
Keda, what's your take on it? Nicholas was very, very open, saying mobile operator groups could do more. I'm aware you're more on the carrier, the wholesale arm. What was MTN Global Kent now rebranded to Baobab? What's your take? Would you be so harsh on yourselves with the 1 out of 10, or what's your take on the situation?
So thanks, James. Look, I think, you know, when you're scoring, you need to put relevancy in place. Africa, when I talk of Africa, about 1 billion mobile users. And through the last 3 years, we've seen data users, active data users, actually go from about 14-15% to now 30-35%. So if you take that relevancy, then I think African operators can give themselves a 5, because we had the advantage of learning from the developed markets. So CPaaS as a tool for digital journeys has been spoken of in boardrooms. You know, when we talk of enabling video, enabling voice, enabling SMS, actually going and leading from the front on RCS business messaging or WhatsApp business services partner, I think we have learned that waiting and watch doesn't help. So let's say for WhatsApp business, which is a meta channel, I think we as MTN went in as the first African operator and said, look, we want to do this with you. There's no point, you know, waiting for our time to come. We want to lead from the front. So I'd give it a 5. We're getting ready, and hopefully by the time there is that digital maturity where you need these multiple channels, we as an operator group will have them to meet demand.
But what about linking back to the previous panel, commercial models in mobile data? So sub-Saharan Africa has some of the highest pricing globally for mobile data. And surely that is a roadblock. And ultimately, it's the mobile operators that have control over that pricing. So what are you doing to champion that with your fellow operators in the industry as a whole to get the message across literally that to bring everything, all the channels, the wonderful engagement that richer channels such as WhatsApp and other chat app, etc., bring as well beyond SMS to a wider audience? Because without that, surely you're dead in the water, there's no point. So it's a big issue, this mobile data pricing.
Brilliant question, and there are multiple facets to it. Look, I'm talking from the perspective of Africa, sub-Saharan included, okay? Mobile data rates have been high, spending power is low, so we need to first look at, can we bring in smartphones at a certain dollar value that an average African can use? Because otherwise all this CPaaS is irrelevant, right? You first need that device. And at Baobab, that's really the mission, to bring in benefits of a modern connected life to those who've not got it yet. We start with fiberizing the continent. So one arm of Baobab is all about putting fiber in Africa. And Africa cannot be spoken of in one breath. It's a large, huge continent. So we are kind of doing what we are so that we partner with strategic investors where MTN plays its part, but we also have others who kind of put in money to build that fiber core. And on top of that sits the Baobab communication platforms, which I run. And that's where, you know, we will bring down the data prices, make it affordable for the user. That's the plan.
Thank you. And very comprehensive. And Vaye, over to you.
My time. Thank you, James. I wouldn't set a note for the CPaaS. I'd set an 8 for the CPaaS. I think that CPaaS is a teenager who has a past that has been growing from traditional communication services, voice and messaging, and now is starting to take its first steps into new life, which should be new services that have to be integrated into CPaaS platforms that would take new use cases for corporates and that will make this grow in a different way than we have
obviously,
seen
you're very strong in Latin America. If you look at the speakers we've got today, we've got Latin America well covered, we've got Africa covered, we've got obviously GTS, your employer is global, but a very, very strong position in India. One country, the same population as the whole of Africa, soon to be the largest country in the world, allegedly, by population at the end of the year. And we've got a very strong position in Europe. So we've got, and then of course we've got Infobip, global, truly global as well. So we've got lots of parts of the world represented here. So Latin America, CPaaS, compared to obviously Telefonica, you have properties in Spain, in Germany, and other countries around Europe. Do you see there's a difference between Latin America and, say, Europe with regards to that, or not? What are you seeing personally? It's a difficult question.
Yeah, difficult.
I always ask the difficult questions.
Okay, don't worry.
Yeah.
There are many social and economic and so many factors that influence on this. For being successful in the CPaaS area, you need the companies to be prepared to use them. And if you look at for an example, the hyperscalers footprint in Latin America, this is much lower than what you have in the North America or in Europe. So that's provides you with an idea of the digitization stage of the companies in that region, which doesn't mean that there are many advanced companies, but the big base that will be the big buyers for these services are not so advanced, and they need to start taking those steps to get into the digitization so that they can take or buy these services through a digital platform. So this is a tricky question because there are many different aspects that we have to
literally the base technology available and mobile data, is it available, access to the internet, smartphones, et cetera, et cetera. Nicholas, on that, leading on from that, so it's very easy for people coming here to this session here in the USA, or you come to a MEF event in Dublin, or wherever you might go, all those countries, the so-called developed world with possibly a higher smartphone penetration, perhaps better access for more to mobile data, but are we getting to the point where we're going to be having a have and a have-not with potential access to CPaaS and ultimately the technology underpinning everything? And ultimately, is what we are talking about on panels like this in many parts of the world just going to be a dream ultimately?
No, I don't think it's going to be a dream. I mean, I was quite critical with my scoring, but at the same time, I'm quite confident that first of all, as an industry, I think, as I said, we're halfway there. But as a telco operator, I'm very, very confident that we are going to get there, and we are not going to need years to get there. I think there is going to be a very accelerated path into that environment because we have a lot to look at already. We don't have to start everything from ground zero. So from that perspective, there is a lot to be done, and I'm confident that mobile operators are in a good position to do this. When you look at the CPaaS environment today, the assets are already owned by the mobile operators. I mean, so you have to be conscious about that. We have the network. We have the termination points if it comes to SMS and so forth. So the connectivity part of it I think, is the issue. I mean, where the mobile operators, in my opinion, have missed out is that they kept concentrating on this base layer of termination points, and they have not been able to move up the value chain. So when you're talking to a customer out there, a large enterprise customer that has requirements all over the world, in order to provide them email and voice and video and messaging and all the other areas that CPaaS covers, there is, again, I'm critical here, but I don't think mobile operators can go and provide one single seamless solutions through API-enabled environment.
That's
to these
omni-channel.
customers.
You're talking omni-channel.
Exactly.
Which is the holy grail, conversational commerce, omni-channel, because what people talk about so much is actually just multi-channel. And there's so many providers of that, but very few can do what you've just talked about properly.
Absolutely. So.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. Now, Anurag, I'm going to put you on the spot here, because we've got Nicholas was very self-critical about mobile operators. And what are mobile network operators doing wrong when it comes to CPaaS?
Well, I think one of the most obvious things which we all know out here, it's like the white elephant. Right? It's there. Like the biggest challenge is that today mobile operators are increasing rates for the various networks in order to monetize it to the maximum. And that's bringing a whole, it's opening a whole can of worms, right? You've got artificial inflation of traffic, you've got traffic trashing, you've got enterprises announcing, there was an announcement by Meta that I think starting 1st of June, they're actually going to be cutting down some 40% or at least 10 markets. They're going to be cutting down OTPs significantly, right? So the business is getting killed, the industry is shrinking, and overall CPaaS is becoming less accessible because, any industry requires certain heavyweights to actually be the anchor. And if the anchor starts pulling off and finding alternates, I think that itself becomes a big challenge. And I think this entire thing has been like it's been like a butterfly effect. It started simply by operators not having firewalled their networks well enough, then reaching a point where they are overdoing the firewalling and the monetization to reaching a point now that the enterprises are reacting to it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges which is already impacting the industry because all said and done, we have an Infobip, we have any company out here, you can check the ones especially where they're public and their reports are available. I think still 90-95% plus, whether it's a Twilio or my ex-employer Tanla or a Root Mobile, all public, or a Cinch, eventually SMS forms the mainstay of any CPaaS organization today. So if the SMS business is a threat, then the entire CPaaS ecosystem comes under threat. So I think that, if you ask me, and you asked me telcos, that's why. There are a lot of other issues at hand, but if you look at the telco service providers, I think that's the biggest issue today, that the mainstay of CPaaS, which is SMS, is under threat. And we need to work as an industry. I was having a chat with some of the other people here in the panel itself, and they mentioned very transparently that, that they wouldn't want this to be the mechanism of growing revenues. This CPaaS has to be made accessible to all, and hence there needs to be certain fair usage policies in place and not fleece the enterprises in order to make a quick buck and look at it in a very short-term point of view. So I think that's the biggest issue today. I just want to make one more point about being accessible since you said India. So I just want to make a point. India is a shining example of making another service a reality for all, and that's digital payments. We have something in India called UPI, the Unified Payment Interface. And today, and you've been around in India as well, James, today almost even a beggar asks for alms or with a mobile phone and a QR code. That's the level of digital payments that's reached in India. And I'm not exaggerating, I've actually experienced it myself. So if you really ask me, when will CPaaS become a reality for all? When you reach that level of reach. So that's something what is, I personally feel that the UPI in India is a perfect benchmark for any service to be made accessible worldwide. And I think a lot of people can learn from this Indian example and see how a service can be made omnipresent in reality.
Thank you. Very, very strong remarks there. Very, very good. Miho, you manage all the carrier relationships for Infobip globally, so you've got a fantastic global overview of what's going on. What issues do you think are holding back mobile operators from really realizing this CPaaS opportunity? So Anurag clearly mentioned the commercial model. We've talked about commercial models on the previous panel. I managed the anti-fraud panel, and we know there's a great interlink and overlap between basically where there's a higher SMS price in simple language, there's more fraud. Let's keep it really, really simple. It's that simple. What other challenges do you see out there?
Well, James, again, I will start with positive. So if you go back a few years and think, like, obviously Anurag is right, there is a disruption, like probably like starting this year, and it will shake the market in many ways. We had similar thing like 3 or 4 years ago with COVID. And actually, I think telcos surprised us all how quickly they adapted, how quickly they, put their heads together and actually enabled us to, survive all this really extraordinary situation. I don't mean like, okay, first line, all these good, people from the medical sector, but after that, the communication actually was very quickly brought up brilliant. So I think this disruption is actually an opportunity for telcos to a little bit shake them up. So everything that telco is doing is good. It's quality, well planned, well executed. It's just maybe slightly slower than the rest of the industry. So this kind of thing can help them just move a little bit faster. And I'll also like point to Anurag's India and saying like, in India there's an example like, I'll just mention one channel like RCS, 250 million of RCS. Could this be an answer? Probably there is no silver bullet, but that's just one, which is in power of telcos. And I was talking to a couple of US telcos here, since I'm based now, they're also seeing this. So there are so many things that could be done, just, a bit more agility and learning from each other. Regulatory part doesn't help somewhere, but again, I wouldn't call it as an excuse. I would just, go around it and see how we can all help each other. Having the global overview, you're right. I've seen some very good examples in different regions. So as Kedar was saying, like, it's hard to talk about CPaaS if you first need to bring the power and affordable mobile phone. But also I need to kudos the MTN now, Baobab, by the way, great name. Congratulations that they are skipping the generation of this one. So we don't have to follow all path. Like, we can jump quickly, and
That's
accelerate.
a really good point, Mio, because I learned that at Mobile Congress 2 years ago, where I moderated a panel there, and there was a startup, and they went straight to WhatsApp. I always thought you had to go through the good old email and SMS and then get to WhatsApp, but they launched their business, and 99% of their client interactions were just using WhatsApp.
Exactly, that's a good example.
And you can do that.
You can do it, and the thing is, all the good ideas, there's already happening. So just, I know for the big groups, like all these distinguished people are here, it's harder to move the big machinery. But when they move, it will keep on rolling.
Yeah.
And ideas are there. Like a couple of us here probably have one or two. If you make it accessible to this audience and then to developers community, SMEs, everybody, then the real ideas will start coming.
Fantastic. Now, Kedar, a mobile operator, let's be very, very clear with mobile operators. So research has been done by the likes of Mobile Squared and other research groups, and some mobile operator groups are doing better than others when it comes to actually selling messaging, dare I say it, to actually getting a higher percentage of their revenue from messaging. But no matter how good a mobile operator group is at this, that figure is that the best out there are generating about 2 to 3% of their total annual revenues come from messaging. That's it. So it's very, very clear that no matter your brand presence, no matter how much messaging you do, it's a very, very small part of the overall business. How do you, because you manage all the whole messaging component, so you understand dealing with the people on the stage and other people in the room here on a daily basis, how important messaging can be for the likes of your business and indeed MTN as a whole. How do you go about doing that, though, to people who simply go, it's only 1%, 2% of my business, I'm not going to give it the focus it needs within your own company? Is it a struggle?
No, it is actually not. Look, comparing this as a service revenue in terms of contribution to the overall bucket is not the right start to begin with. Because you need to understand that a mobile operator is driven by the ARPU that its consumers generate, carved out of voice, out of data, out of a whole lot of content services, value-added services. So messaging and its contribution to the overall bucket is not ignored. There was a time about 10 years back, okay, when we would go into EXCO meetings and each executive would say, look, SMS is dying, P2P is dying. And WhatsApp was becoming popular, the new age messaging forms were becoming popular. Then a bunch of young leaders came in and said, look, there is still the promotional component, the marketing component, the authentication component, and you still tend to have a better click-through ratio on this channel than what you get on emails, let's say, right? So people understand the importance of messaging. We don't really look at it from the point of view of overall contribution, but when you build a sizable mass, right? So for a operator group that's, let's say, got 50 million subscribers, for that kind of an operator group to generate a messaging revenue for the year, I'm talking of business messaging, okay? $1 to a subscriber is not difficult through the year. It's $50 million. That's a lot of money for anybody, okay? Now, where I think, Anurag has spoken about this earlier, and where some MNOs go wrong, and this is that vicious part of it. When you don't have a profitable lever in your business, you start to look at exploiting some channels. So you say, look, I've got 50 million subscribers, but I want 500 million in SMS revenue. So then there is a bunch of guys who say, okay, we'll give you 500 million, and then there's the one-upmanship in the partners. Oh, you did 500, I'll do 510. Oh, you did 510, I'll do 550. And how do you make that? You price an SMS at 50 cents per SMS. Now that's the trap that one should avoid. So for MNOs who really want to keep this channel relevant, sustainable, they need to put their hands in, understand that doing these send or pay kind of models don't really sustain. They will die its natural death. And that's the reason Meta said they will not use SMS in some markets, not all markets. Some of us have long-term deals with the likes of Meta and Google, and they are going to use SMS no matter what. They will use their SMS. So that sums it all.
Thank you, Kedar. So, Vaya, yourself. So, we know mobile operators are principally around to make sure everyone in this room and everyone watching can actually use their phones at home, use their phones when roaming abroad, coming to events like this, send SMS to their friends and loved ones, receive SMS from businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So you're providing P2P services. That is your core business. But you also provide services to enterprises, internet access for enterprises, handsets, of course, to enterprises and things like that. How important are you finding, if you can offer a very, very good messaging solution, a nice CPaaS solution to an enterprise, how is that helping you generate or cement, strengthen those long-term relationships with businesses, and ultimately help you build those relationships with enterprises? How important is the messaging component in there?
CPaaS, depending on how you focus on it, is not a new market. This is a different way of doing the same businesses. But the key element for us is how you approach companies and you help them to solve their business problems. And one of the biggest problems and challenges that companies have now is about multi-channel. It's about how they build their marketing campaigns, how they get into their customers, how they attract them, and how they engage them into new products in a new and different way. And this is a key starting point to have different conversations with our customers. Because when you talk to them from their business problems, then you get into another conversation, which is not the price of the message or the price for the transaction or whatever. You start talking about which is the value of the services that you are providing them for their own businesses. And this is the value that we are seeing and trying to exploit from our multi-channel strategy.
Can I ask you, it's something that I've always personally thought about, and I've been thinking about it for years. I've never seen. So I host the Global Carrier Billing Summit, an event which we're running this year in Amsterdam, and there was a panel discussion last year when it was in Berlin last September. We had all the German operators were together on stage, and this was about payments. Now, all of them were on stage, and in Germany, this is a perfect example. When it comes to paying for something with your mobile phone, there's Zahl einfach per's Handy, pay easily with your mobile, by mobile. Yeah. So they have that tagline, they have that collective. So Deutsche Telekom obviously is a keen competitor of Vodafone, a keen competitor of Telefonica, et cetera, but they combine together, they come together, they have a tagline promoting paying for things using your mobile phone, and they have adverts. And I've seen those adverts. Why is it that I've never, ever seen on TV or mainstream media or anything, personally, I'm probably in the wrong country in the UK, I don't know, but I've never seen an advert for business messaging and mobile operators together in Spain or together in Germany or other countries. And so I'm going to come to you as well. You're getting ready. You're warming up as well. Why don't we see that? Just people at home have TV adverts from mobile operators going, hey, this is how great business messaging is. I see them talking about how great 5G is, and hey, I can land a plane at an airport because of the strength of, thank you, because of the strength of the 5G signals. You see 5G and coverage covered, but not messaging.
I mean, probably because this is an old service, and at least in my experience, we saw, as you were saying, the peer-to-peer messaging going down.
Yeah.
Then it has come back up with the A2P, but probably it's easier to get into that kind of partnership and relationship when you are talking about greenfield businesses, where you don't have so much to lose and you have everything to win. And then it's easier to talk to someone and say, okay, how are we going to coordinate? How can we work together and so on? And it's more difficult to do that in businesses where you are competing hardly for years and you take the experience and the background of what has happened to your business in the past. So I'm not sure, but probably...
It's a really good point, because CPaaS is being talked about everywhere, but messaging isn't new, and businesses using messaging isn't new. You guys, all the operators here, and Infobip, you've been doing it from day one, and GTS, you've been doing it from day one as well. So it's a really, really good point. Very, very good point. Nicholas, you got anything to add to that? So in Germany,
Yes,
I mentioned on the payment side of things,
yeah,
everyone's competing massively on payments, but they come together with this joint initiative to promote it. So
yeah, I think just on the, I mean, there are areas where collaboration happens in this space. When you look at an initiative called Camara, for instance, which is creating very much seamless APIs to be able to access networks when it comes to the IoT environments and so forth. So there are collaborative environments that are taking place, and telcos as well as digital service providers and OTTs are part of this Camara alliance. So there are alliances that are, of course, it's relatively new as a concept, but it's working. And Telefonica, Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone, I'm sure the MTN being part of it. So it happens. When it comes to mobile identity, you also see a bit of an alliance there, because customers are saying, when I ask for mobile identity and one network in a country doesn't help, I want the country coverage. So again, those things are starting to happen. I am not really sure why we need the same when it comes to A2P. I mean, when I think about CPaaS, the last thing I think about is what is creating the basis of it. All I care about is what are the customers asking for, and how can I create a seamless opportunity for that customer to go through me alone and access everything else that they need across the globe. And I collaborate with our colleagues here, we collaborate with the rest of the world. So I don't think there is a necessity to go and say, oh, we are creating an alliance on A2P, okay? First of all, there is also a commercial model that exists that I'm not sure if any of us want to necessarily kill that commercial model at this point in time. So we are still making money out of this environment. So creating an alliance from that perspective and aligning things, I'm not sure is the best thing. But again, there are alliances that are working. Here, again, when I talk about CPaaS, I'm talking about customer experience, a seamless customer experience, creating an environment with, and we talk a lot about SMS here. For me, CPaaS is not SMS. Okay, let me be very clear here.
It's conversational commerce, richer messaging.
Exactly. It's about everything that the customer needs in order to communicate with their customers. An enterprise customer, BMW has customers all over the world. Whatever channel for BMW to to communicate with their customers is what I consider to be CPaaS. So it's not just SMS. As when you look at the CPaaS environment today, around a bit less than 60% of CPaaS is SMS today. Of course, there is the email and so forth. So it's not just about SMS when I refer to CPaaS.
Fantastic, very good point. Now, Anurag, very, very good point made by Nicholas there. Now, when it comes to yourselves, Globe Teleservices, obviously with your own CPaaS solution, your omni-channel solution, how do you find it approaching enterprises and educating them? Because so many of us are so used to talking about, SMS is great, it's better than email, but actually a richer channel such as WhatsApp business messaging is better, but then actually in certain use cases, RCS business messaging is better than WhatsApp. It creates confusion. Are we or not our own worst enemies at conferences like this? Conferences saying, well, actually, you should be using that for this use case, you should be using that. What about keeping it simple and addressing the basic issue that hundreds of millions of these smaller and medium businesses you talked about aren't using anything? They're not even using SMS.
Do you listen to music?
Yes, but my musical tastes are stuck in the late 80s and early 90s.
Which platform do you use?
I have to admit, I've got my little iPod Nano and I have my Amazon Music.
Okay. Nick, what about you? Spotify, okay. I'll leave it at that. Mine is YouTube, okay? So I think what I'm getting at out here is that the platform doesn't matter. It's the use cases, as you rightly said, that matter. I think it's very important to have all platforms available. So whether it is, like you said, you use Amazon, you use Apple iTunes or whichever, and you use Spotify, I use YouTube. I think it's not about having multiple channels. It's about optimally using all the channels. I think all the channels are needed. Each channel has its own commercial models and its own efficacy in respective markets. So from that perspective, from the nuances perspective between the various channels, it's very important to keep all channels alive. If you look at India, WhatsApp is very important. If you look at the US, half of them don't talk about WhatsApp, right? They talk about RCS. When you talk about RCS, you have Apple who says that, tell your grandmother to buy an apple, right? So that's what every channel brings with it, certain pros and cons. I don't think we confuse ourselves, or I don't think we trip on ourselves by offering multiple channels. What's more important is to have platforms which are seamlessly being able to combine these channels into an omni-channel, and as you yourself put it, James, not a multi-channel approach. So if you're able to have platforms which offer use cases with a truly omni-channel approach, and not just that, hey, we have WhatsApp also, we have RCS also, we have SMS also. No. Depending on the use case and depending on the target segment that you're targeting, today we talk about CDPs and CIPs, which are customer data platforms and customer intelligence platforms. That talks about micro-segmentation and hyper-personalization. These platforms are able to form unique personas for each and every individual, right from what sort of music you listen to on your iPod to what bread you eat when you go to your grocers to pick up bread. It's very important to see each persona and accordingly have the right channel for the right use case. So I think all channels are important. What's most important is that when you assimilate these channels on a truly omni-channel CPaaS platform, how you're able to offer the right use cases and the right mix of channels to the enterprises.
Mio, we're coming up to the end of our session, believe it or not. We've got 2 minutes 30, but I'm gonna be a bad moderator, and I'm sorry, organizer. I'm gonna overrun a couple of minutes here, because it's a really important topic. Are we actually, at the end of the day, you always say, people say the customer's right, give the customer what they want. Is anyone actually asking the customer what channel they want to be contacted by? And do we have that intelligence, the knowledge, the platforms to be able to say that James prefers SMS, Nicholas prefers WhatsApp, Anurag prefers RBM, so I as an enterprise will communicate accordingly?
Yeah, so actually we do have. We are not asking the customers like purely like this, but we do have all this visibility. So as Anurag was pointing out, so currently the best CPaaS platforms in the world, and there are a few of them, have this data, have this analytic, have this reporting, and are able to tell with a fairly good certainty and hyper-personalization which end subscriber like to receive which type of message on which channel. So what we can say is actually there is not one channel to rule them all. This was like maybe 30 years ago, but now you see like things are dispersing. And actually we don't see like on certain use cases, and we are now like, touch a little bit like this OTP, which is kind of, hot because of money and stuff. But just move away from this. So CPaaS is not, I agree with Nicholas, SMS, and CPaaS is not OTP. So if we just remove these two, let's say, extremes, hot topics, the channels are not competing. So like there's use cases for each channel. And usually on average, each consumer is using between 3 and 5 channels, depending on what type of content, which type of the day, from which type of business it's using. So there is this data. Where I think so everything that was said here, it already exists today. It's just a matter of like, when to use it and how. What I think is the next step is enriching those CPaaS channels with a little bit of SaaS and AI and stuff like this so that we can offer more and, as someone mentioned here, like raise up in the value chain so that we don't just purely use CPaaS, but now, okay, let's add more value into this one. So this value is exactly what you say, reporting and data and helping the brands, depending on an industry, to just not use CPaaS, but also get this analytic out and have this feedback loop, meaning how are their campaigns doing and how they can do better, and even have some recommendations. Okay, if you do this and this, it's highly likely your campaign will do good. And this is not just from usability, but also price performance and other things. So it's already there a lot, and a lot of work is being done to raise the CPaaS to the higher value chain, utilizing all these new technologies now.
Fantastic. Now, Kedar, one thing we haven't talked about, we've talked heavily about use cases, one-time passwords, transactional use cases, but let's look at the marketing side of things. And I'm opening a whole new door here. We could be here for another hour. We won't be. We're just going to be here another 2 minutes. But the world of digital advertising, hundreds of billions of dollars are spent with Meta, and we had Meta speaking, or WhatsApp was represented at an event. I moderated and hosted some sessions at last year, and I looked online and found I think it's 98% of Meta's revenue comes from digital advertising. So WhatsApp at the moment is tiny, but it will grow. Why is it that businesses are spending, small and medium-sized enterprises are spending literally hundreds of billions of dollars on digital advertising, which, as we all know, is not as effective when it comes to conversion ratio as SMS or richer channels, which have all been mentioned already, and yet probably barely 1/10, 1/7, 1/8, depending who you ask, of that equivalent is spent on A2P messaging. What are they doing right that the messaging world is doing wrong?
No, look, again, James, messaging world is not doing wrong, and it's not so much a doomsday story, okay? Look, mobile advertising...
I'm taking
yeah,
Nicholas's
you're being
lead.
a little harsh, but let me put things in perspective quickly. Mobile advertising, digital advertising is a very, very native use case to RBM and WhatsApp and Viber, okay? Because when you talk of conversations, when you talk of being able to show, then tell, that capability SMS will never give you. At its root, it's a 160-character message, right? So you need these rich messaging channels to be able to be more effective in digital advertising. So when MNOs, think of me as an enterprise. You know what you just spoke of, digital advertising. You know how much MNOs spend in that kitty? We advertise on the digital channels more than a lot of others. So for us, we need that effective tool. And when we, as MNOs, pick up RBM or WhatsApp, we think of it as a medium to advertise digitally and effectively. And that's why the MNO becomes very, very relevant to Google's RBM ambition or Meta's WhatsApp ambition. If you remove that, then RBM doesn't make a lot of money, as you know. That's why we say SMS is still 90%.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Fantastic.
I hope that answers.
It does, absolutely. And Vaya, do you know what? Final comment, you get to close the event. From an education perspective, it's clear we've established on this panel mobile operators could generally do better, but we've established also, of course, partnerships are very important with the likes of GTS and Infobip and others here in this room and around, so we've got that sorted. The commercial model, stability, consistency is what's required. We've established also that it shouldn't just be one channel is better than the other. What about the regulation side of things and the government side of things? Because we talked about so many different channels. Regulation was mentioned in the anti-fraud side of things. And from your perspective, is it because of these regulations, perhaps, that people are thinking, do you know what, I'm going to stay away from using perhaps messaging because there's clear regulation that if I step out of line, then I could be hit with something. Whereas if I use perhaps digital advertising, there may be less controls. So has the regulatory aspect got anything to do with CPaaS adoption or not?
I think it has to do with the way in which we implement services, but it doesn't have anything to do with the way companies consume the services. Because by the end, they trust in us, like providers, that we have all the capabilities and the regulations to provide those.
So you know the regulations, you know the rules, and as long as an enterprise partners with the right messaging provider, whether it's direct with the operator or indirectly with a GTS or an Infobip of the world, then that's the way to do it.
Yeah, that's it. We need to be aware of it, and we need to accomplish with regulation, and then our customers need to be free of that worry. I mean,
fantastic. So keep those brands trusted, folks, because you operators have some of the most trusted brands on the planet, and indeed MTN, you have the most trusted brand. I remember that because I did a session at AfricaCom last year, and you had the most trusted brand in Africa last year. So fantastic. Everyone, this brings to the end the messaging, commercial models, etc. related track of discussions. I'd like to thank Finlay Eglinton. I'd like to thank James Netherwood, the ITW team, for putting this track together with me. And our speakers today, we've got Valle from Telefonica, we've got Kedar from, I was nearly about to say it, Baobab. Thank you. It's going to take a long time, but I'll get there. Miho from Infobip, Anurag from GTS, and Nicholas. A real pleasure meeting you in person.